Do you guys know about the Sharpeville massacre? Sharpeville massacre. I'm going to tell you about the Sharpeville massacre and explain to you how it has a powerful weapon that can make a world of a difference in the Tanzanian massacre that is currently unfolding. Sharpeville is a township that is about 50 kilometers south of Johannesburg. In 1960, the apartheid police opened fire on innocent and armed protesters. They opened fire at them. They shot at innocent and armed protesters. Consequently, 69 black South Africans died. Let's look at why they were protesting. As you all know by now, apartheid treated people who look like me as unworthy creatures, as lesser creatures. The entire apartheid system revolved around treating the black person as a lesser human being. The entire system ostracized the black person, treated melanin as unworthy of the quality of life that the white South Africans in that system enjoyed. That's why it was so easy for the apartheid police to train their guns on the innocent protesters, unarmed protesters, train their guns on them and kill them. They felt nothing because, as far as they were concerned, they were simply ridding the country of creatures who are unworthy to even call that country home. And so they shot them. 69 died. Now, what happened after that, in the aftermath of that, is actually the powerful weapon that I was telling you at the introduction of this show. That powerful weapon ended up making a world of a difference in South Africa. And that weapon is going to make a world of a difference in Tanzania. There's a problem, though. There's a problem. This weapon has an expiry date. This powerful, unstoppable weapon has an expiry date. In other words, if you don't use that weapon within a stipulated time frame, it loses its potency. It loses its power. And when that happens, the tyrants, the enemies, they usually end up winning. That's why today, as I speak to you in Africa, there are people dying in the Sahel in West Africa. That's why Ibrahim Traore and his government are only in control of slightly more than 50% of Burkina Faso, because the rest, the country, is in the hands of the jihadists. Because that weapon that I'm talking about, that I want to tell you today, it has an expiry date. And in the Sahel region, for most people in Africa, it has already expired. Because it has already expired, they cannot even use it. It has already expired. It has gone bad. The good news, though, is this. The good news, though, is this. It is possible. It is possible to recapture the potency of this weapon, to recapture the power of this weapon. How do we do that? Enter Tanzania. Enter Tanzania. On 29th October, in the morning, when Samia Suluhu Hassan was casting this ballot, there were more than 10,000, mostly young Tanzanians, who were still alive. They were still alive. They knew that later in the day, they were going to have some pilau for lunch. They were going to have some biryani for lunch. They were going to have some ugali for dinner. They knew that on this day, yes, voting was taking place, but the rest of their lives were still ahead of them. And so they knew that today is just the first day of the rest of my life. And even if Samia Suluhu wins, because Tundu Lissu, her main opponent, is barred from running, even if she wins, today is just the first day of the rest of my life. There were such young people in Dar es Salaam, commercial capital of Tanzania. There were such young people in Dodoma, the capital of Tanzania. There were such young people in Mwanza, that big city that sits on the shores of Lake Victoria. They were there. As they gazed at Lake Victoria, as they gazed at this lake, they could sense that whatever happens today, we still have the rest of our lives. Today is but the first day of the rest of our lives. There were such young people in Mbeya, marvelous Mbeya, beautiful Mbeya. Look for yourself. Do you see how beautiful Mbeya is? There were young people who were born in Mbeya who woke up that day, cast their votes, and even if they didn't vote because they didn't believe that those were free and fair elections, they still knew that today was the first day of the rest of their lives. There were such young people in Mbeya, in Dar es Salaam, in Dodoma, in Mwanza, and across the country. Now, fast forward 3 days later, here are those young people. Here they are. Do you see their lifeless bodies? Do you see their lifeless bodies? Some of them died on 29th October, a day they thought was just but the first day of the rest of their lives. They died in the Dar es Salaam massacre. Just like those 69 innocent unarmed South Africans died in the Sharpeville massacre at the hands, at the bullets of the apartheid police. These young people, these Tanzanians, they also died at the hands of their own police, their own government took them out because this government did not regard them as God's children, as fellow Tanzanians, as fellow human beings, but they regarded them as obstacles in an imperial presidency that didn't just have insatiable hunger for power, they now had insatiable appetite for blood, the blood of the Tanzanians themselves. That's how the first day of the rest of their lives on 29th October became the last day of their lives. In that Dar es Salaam massacre, in that Dodoma massacre, in that Mbeya massacre, in that Mwanza massacre. That's how the first day of their lives became the last day of their lives. Some of them lived to see the sunrise of 30th October. And they even heard that people have been killed in Dar es Salaam. People have been killed in Dodoma, in Mwanza. Some of them survived that massacre, and they thought that 30th October was now the first day of the rest of their lives. Now they knew that these lives of theirs were but fragile lives because their government, Samia Suluhu's government, did not give a damn about them. They didn't care for them. Just like the apartheid government and the apartheid police didn't care for the black people of South Africa in the Sharpeville massacre of 1960. This government, this rogue government, didn't care for them. They didn't. They knew that their lives were fragile, but they remained hopeful that 30th October was the first day of their lives. But look at these images. Look at these images that we have had to cover because that's how gruesome they are. They are gruesome because these bullets that you're seeing were fired from the guns of Tanzanian police, from the guns of Tanzanian special forces, from the guns, possibly, of Tanzanian soldiers. Tanzanian soldiers in the Tanzanian army, the same army that way back in 1979 faced Idi Amin and defeated him, not to kill the people, but to save the people. This same Tanzanian army was now part of this unholy trinity, evil trinity of the army, the police, and the special forces. And they were now killing these young people that you can see on the screens right now. Do you see that lady? There are two ladies in this image. The lady that is bending over her friend, who was alive just a minute earlier, she can barely believe that the police have killed her friend. She can barely believe that. And her friend, do you see that lady? She has lost her life. When she woke up on this morning of 31st October, she could never have imagined, even in her worst nightmares, that this was going to be her last day. Not because God ordained it that way, but because a psychopathic regime led by Samia Suluhu decided that she was the enemy of the state who could no longer remain alive. And so they killed her. This became the last day of her life. Why am I recounting all this? Do you know that thing that you're feeling in your chest at this moment? That anger that you're feeling as I recount this, as you watch these images, that is called, amongst many other names, it is also called moral outrage. Moral outrage. It is the same moral outrage after the Sharpeville massacre that drove African presidents of a newly independent Africa. It drove Africans. It drove Mwalimu Julius Nyerere and many other founding presidents of Africa whose countries are still in the jaws and the claws of colonialism. It drove them to begin a decades-long fight against apartheid. And when Nelson Mandela became president of a free South Africa in the 90s, it was a culmination of this moral outrage driving all manner of action. And that's what Tanzania needs today, moral outrage. That feeling in your chest, that's moral outrage. And if you don't act on that, it has an expiry date. That's why most Africans no longer care about what happens in Congo. That's why many Africans no longer care about what is happening in Sudan. They watch the images from El Fasher They feel bad about it, but life goes on. Because moral outrage has an expiry date. If you don't act on moral outrage when it is hot, it's going to grow cold. And when it grows cold, you normalize this brutality that you can see on the screens. You normalize. Last year, I wrote a book about historic African leaders like Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, Julius Nyerere, and of course, Ibrahim Traore. There are nearly 100 of them in that book. Many of you have already bought the book, and I'm very grateful for that. If you haven't bought it, please head on to Amazon and purchase your copy. Both physical and digital copies are available. Thanks a lot.